Hi, I am Vitold, and it's fun to see that there are some rumors, and maybe even some real spy shots. After earlier this year, I spoke about my expectations on BMW simply having to launch or show the redesigned big GS pretty soon. Come on, it's been like nearly 10 years since the last series design change in the top-of-the-line GS, the one with a two-cylinder boxer engine. We don't know if the spy shots that you are seeing are real, but they just as well may be. So let me dig into what likely changes there will be in the upcoming GS, also what seems to be happening based on those spy shots, as we can get some initial conclusions, and also what I believe BMW might add or change in its best-selling motorcycle, this current GS. And I will also add some of my own wishes and ideas for BMW, since we know that they care about the GS so much and they should be listening to us, especially right now. Sometimes, manufacturers leak spy shots themselves to check the initial reaction before they launch the final version of their product. So it's our chance, guys. Let's use this opportunity since we can. It's actually smart by manufacturers, but of course we don't know if that's the case with BMW here. Let's first talk about weight, as I believe that there is really no need to drop any weight in a GS. Just look at Ducati Multistrada V4S and BMW S1000 XR, which are a bit lighter and which feel heavier than the current GS. The GS with fuel weighs 249 kilograms, Multistrada V4S weighs 242 kilograms, but base one weighs 240, and the big XR is weighing 226 kilograms, so over 20 kilograms less, and because here's the conclusion coming, and it's not helping them at all. I would say, GS, don't worry with your almost 250 kilograms of weight. Power? Yes, an increase in power would be very much appreciated, as current 136 horsepower isn't that impressive when we compare it with the competition of over 160 horsepower. Power gives you that high RPM craziness when accelerating, and GS would benefit from that. It would be more exciting and would be getting closer to the competitors, and nobody would have any reason to complain about the lower number anymore. And I would say that 150 horsepower may be a psychological number that many people would like to see on the GS. It's a whole different story whether that would have any super significant effect or impact, but I think it should happen. 160 horsepower would make it 100% competitive in the segment, and perhaps that's possible. I don't see why a two-cylinder boxer engine could not be as powerful as a two-cylinder V-twin. Nobody told Porsche that a boxer engine has to be weaker than other types of engines. So BMW, go ahead, move your butts, your turn. Now, what about torque? I think there's no need to touch that, as the GS is a torque king already. And this is what gives it this low RPM and mid-range pull when accelerating in any gear. Current 143 Newton meters are class leading, and they provide us with awesome flexibility. Yeah, sure, it would be cool to have it bumped to, let's say, 150, just for the sake of reaching the number, and having it available really low in the range. Yeah, why not? If that's possible, sure, let's have it. Now, what we may kind of know, and multiple rumors seem to point that out, is that the bike's engine may become fully liquid cooled, fully water cooled. Now it's just partially a bit water cooled, and adding more effective cooling, BMW could bump up the power without the risk of overheating. And this might suggest that indeed more power is coming. It's a major change in the engine's design, so it will be interesting to see in the end how it plays out. The topic of the size of the bike. I actually think that it's close to perfect right now. It's a tall motorcycle, but there already are, first, lowered seats available and lowered suspension kits available. So as long as BMW keeps those available straight from the factory to order, it's going to be perfect, I think, still. Some of us have noticed that in the photos the bike seems pretty compact, in some photos by the way, and indeed it does in them. It's just that in the photos anything can look in a certain way and then turn out to be totally different in reality. It may be the proportions of the bike, the rider's size, an angle at which a photo has been taken, or those pictures may not even be real or may be modified, or the bike may be stripped off of the parts too. Look at this picture. The camouflaged bike is further in the picture and it doesn't appear to be necessarily smaller here. I like the GS the way it is right now in terms of size myself. The current design is with us from 2013, and despite the bike's evolution from that time and even the name change from 1200 GS to 1250 GS, the looks have stayed pretty much the same. A different front light would be perhaps the biggest change that most of us would manage to notice from 2013, and I believe that it's high time for a refresh, but not because the bike looks outdated, but more for the sake of changing something to make it look like a new thing that stays up to date. And I believe that this should happen anytime soon now. And this transmission comes to you from 2021. If you were to believe that the spy shots were real, then this new bike may look a bit creepy actually. And a bit like a hunchback from Notre Dame, with that front lamp so low and being like this, with its neck so much forward and low, like it's been using Instagram on the phone a bit too much. It's a bit looking like the previous Duck V-Strom, so ugly as hell. Let's hope not. We cannot say and we cannot judge anything before we actually see it in this case. But if people from BMW are listening, then please take my warning and don't make the GS look creepy. Look what happened to the V-Strom, it's dead now. I also believe that the asymmetrical front lamp simply needs to stay. It is a legendary part of a GS, which is a legendary bike in BMW's portfolio in a whole model range. And while we've seen it disappearing, this asymmetrical light, from other BMW motorcycles, actually making them look better, I would be surprised if BMW completely got rid of it in a GS. I would not want that to happen actually. What I would like to be changed, and it likely will be, is a windscreen. But I would like a one that would be adjustable in terms of its angle. I had a bike with an accessory called Madstad. It's an American invention available for motorcycles, and it's not an advertisement. And this thing, if you install it, it lets you slide the windscreen so much more up and so much more down, but also it lets you to adjust its tilt, its angle, like almost from vertical to almost horizontal. And that would be a great addition to the new GS. Just partner up with Madstad BMW. They already have the know-how, and it's pretty simple and not even that expensive. Now, what we already have, and it works great in a GS, is cornering ABS, is traction control, it's cornering LED front lights, and also keyless access, along with the keyless fuel cap, which is a big thing. There's also a heated seat for the rider, and from not long ago, a heated passenger seat. And of course, things like heated grips, a quick shifter, gear indicator, or cruise control, they have been in a GS for a while too. Don't expect anything to change here for worse, I think. What may change, but we would not necessarily want it to change, which is, for example, a drive shaft in BMW's paralever rear single-sided swing arm, which would be great if BMW kept, as it's a great selling point for the bike. No maintenance is needed, it keeps the bike clean and it looks great. I would also like BMW to keep the front telelever suspension, and what is great and unique about it is that it keeps the bike almost totally flat when braking, and that gives you total control over the bike, and it gives you a very enjoyable feeling when braking. No other bike will make you smile as much when braking. Some rumors suggest that it may be gone, as we cannot see it clearly in the spy shots, but I would be extremely surprised if that would happen. Now, if it does, it will be very interesting, and I'll be very curious about how BMW handles that matter and how they want to keep the bike as amazingly stable and predictable as with the telelever front suspension. Yes, it's not the best when off-roading, but it doesn't require a lot of sacrifices there. While on the road, it's just a killer comparing to other adventure motorcycles. It's simply amazing as f***, and I love it, and it works. What about the name of the bike now? I guess this may depend on what happens to the engine that was just redesigned and got more power not long ago. So if capacity or even power are indeed to be increased, as we expect in fact, then I would of course change the name, or I would change the number in the GS's name. Maybe not immediately to 1300, but to 1270, for example. Because look, there was 1260 in Ducati, and there is 1290 in KTM. So on one hand, BMW should stick to something in between, like 1270 or 1280, and on the other, they could just as well name the GS a 1300 to show that it's again carrying the biggest name, or a name number and bigger than its competitors. And I kind of think that it would be a better choice for them to go along this path. Current capacity of the engine in a GS is 1254, so in fact BMW could have done it already, and it would have been alright to round it up to 1300. But there are also other ways to differentiate it, and there has been mentioned a name of M1300 GS, which could mean something like Mummy's 1300 GS, or M Performance, or would just mean nothing. Anyway, BMW allegedly officially applied for this name some time ago already. Now the danger that I see is that 1300 starts sounding huge and heavy, almost literally, for a motorcycle, especially for an adventure motorcycle. And it could make riders say, oh damn, it's getting bigger and bigger, so I better go check out this smaller F850 GS, as this 1300 is just too much for me now. I guess we will see about that. Now, let me explain what I would like to see that's already in some other motorcycles, and then what is not there out in any motorcycle, but I would like to see it in the incoming GS. And in fact, we'll praise any manufacturer that invents them in a motorcycle. So let's go. First, what we have is a front radar that could and perhaps will be there in the GS, as Ducati in their Multistrada V4 has it in the same category, and BMW added it right after that to their RT. So now I expect to see it in the GS, and spy shots seem to confirm that with this flat spot above the front light. Looks like shit because of that, so I think that once they remove the covers, it won't be this way, or they will reposition it in the meantime. So let's complain a little bit so that it doesn't make the bike look like a creepy thing. But I actually totally don't care about the adaptive cruise control, which this radar is for, in a motorcycle, and I don't see that much of a use for it. I love it in cars, but cannot see a way of using that in a motorcycle, really. Likely it will be there, and let's end it with this. What I would like to see, that is there also in some bikes, is BLIS, so a blind spot monitoring system, and that's something that BMW doesn't have in their motorcycles yet, and I would love the GS to get that. Actually, I think it would make sense for all motorcycles to have it, just like ABS and traction control and tire pressure monitoring system. So Ducati has this option, this feature, this function, and it's likely that BMW will soon follow. It will likely arrive in the GS, and shots posted on the internet also seem to confirm that as well. Just look at that flat spot in the rear. As long as those pictures are real, of course, which we may never know till the official launch, but I guess it should happen, and that would be cool and good. What is also technically possible is an electrically adjustable windscreen. That would be an action of 2 steps forward, comparing to adding just more range to movement to the current windshield and letting us to change the angle separately, as I mentioned before. But I would like that electric adjustment. I just love the idea and love to show off when stopping at the traffic lights, when riding, for example, an RT, and just moving the screen up and down. It keeps pedestrians amused. And I'm also demanding that BMW introduce themes for us to choose from on the digital display. I really want, and I demand it harshly, to have a choice of colors and different graphics, or at least different graphics, so that I could finally have a proper dual digital, analog looking in a digital form dashboard in front of me, where I could see the round gauges along with all the information. But I want them round and with needles. even digital. They can do it in cars, so they can do it here. It is a purely software thing that I'm totally sure many of us would appreciate. Even a Rolls-Royce, and I'm sitting on a Rolls-Royce office chair. This is a real Rolls-Royce Phantom Coupe office chair. And even Rolls-Royce now is having digital gauges, but they are having an analog, nice, elegant look. So Rolls-Royce belongs to BMW, so I won't accept any bullshit here. Do it, BMW, we are counting on you. And I also think that if there's enough space, and since we already are going in this direction, a bigger fancy screen from R1250 RT, it's a 10.25 inches screen, it should find its space here in the newest GS. More gadgets is more fun, so I hope they will throw it all in there. With what BMW could convince me to actually buy a GS would be making it sound nicely. Right now I'm not exactly a fan of a boxer engine sound. And I also don't really enjoy listening to any inline 4-cylinder engine. Just make it clear, the boxer in BMW is a 2-cylinder engine. And look what engineers at Yamaha have done years ago with a 4-cylinder R1 sports bike. The bike sounds awesome. So I bet it is doable with a 2-cylinder boxer too. So that's my challenge, my personal, my own challenge for BMW. Or just install a Two Brothers exhaust on it straight from the factory and make the bike fail both emissions and noise standards. Now let's inspire BMW Motorrad with what nobody has and what would really make sense in a GS, which would be a height adjustable suspension. Right now, the electronically adjustable suspension called by BMW ESA is already there for years. What it does is basically it makes the suspension more or less stiff, and it does pretty much nothing. I don't feel myself a difference between the modes, even though I know it's there, but I really cannot sense the differences. I do sense, I do feel it very clearly in cars, in many cars, but not in motorcycles. I also feel no differences in Ducati Multistrada, for example, so it's not BMW's fault. Now, what I meant is kind of air suspension like we know from cars. There are many expensive parts and it requires a lot of parts in general, heavy parts, but it gives a very comfortable feel and lets you change the vehicle's overall height and therefore ground clearance, since it's being lifted from the ground. This in a bike would solve short and tall riders' issues with seat heights and could also make you switch to truly off-road riding style, as the 1250 GS currently has just 18.5 centimeters of ground clearance, which is not much. The Adventure has 22, so that's fine. It's actually as much as Ducati Multistrada V4 now has, base version. So in this picture, it appears to be actually very much similar, the new and the potentially new and the current 1250 in terms of ground clearance. Now getting this in a GS could actually endanger the Adventure version's existence, but then BMW could on the other hand just give the riders an option of choosing the bike with a smaller or a larger fuel tank, or just make the extreme numbers or the extreme positions starting from a higher position in an Adventure. Anyhow, I think this would be huge, but I believe it's too complicated, it's too heavy, too unreliable potentially, and I don't think we will see that in the motorcycles anytime soon. But on the other hand, what is there in modern cars that motorcycles don't already have? Except for massaging and ventilated seats and, say, autonomous driving. Still, the big GS's key thing is how it rides and handles, and I'm convinced that it's the easiest Adventure motorcycle to ride, and I'm 100% sure that the most fun and the most enjoyable in terms of making the bike go where you want it to go. And this behavior may be not that easy to achieve with any kind of truly adjustable suspension. Now, if not the height adjustable suspension, then an electrically adjustable seat height, at least. This is totally doable, it wouldn't weigh that much, and it would be cool. I'd say BMW, go to work. And hey, there's one more thing that I think should and needs to find its way into motorcycles sooner or later, and it's a glare-free high beam. This technology is there in cars for years now, and even cheap car manufacturers have it in some of their models. What this is a front lamp with the possibility of dimming some parts of light stream, so that when using high beam at night, you wouldn't have to switch it completely off and switch back to low beam instead. But the lamp would either block or switch off parts of the light that would otherwise shine at the drivers in the front. This would be a huge safety and comfort enhancement, and I believe that this can come to any kind of motorcycles at some point. It just requires a camera, a front camera actually. But the BMW has the best chances of doing that, as they already have the technology in their cars. Now, standard height adjustable footrest would be a fine addition too. That's I assume, a pretty easy thing to do. I would love to lower them in a simple way for a long distance cruising, and then raise back up for some super twisty roads to be able to avoid scratching them too much in curves. Now, another thing is the front camera itself that would read road signs and could display speed limits on the dashboard. Well, I would definitely enjoy that, and I love that in cars. This could also assist the front radar and add a function of collision warning. For example, some red indicator flashing on the bike's dashboard. No emergency braking should be there, however, as on motorcycles, that's definitely not going to work. It could do more bad than good, surprising riders who aren't already paying attention anyway, and that's why they need collision warning. So emergency braking is not probably going to work on motorcycles. Well, one last thing, bring back the Doppelhorn. I remember having that on BMW R1150 RT years ago, and such a double horn, because that would, I believe, be the translation from German. It was totally awesome, and it is needed on a motorcycle, on all, or at least many motorcycles today too. Come on, BMW, bring that back. Yes, we need, in other words, a train horn sometime. Don't we all? So that's my vision of a possible enhanced BMW GS of the new upcoming generation. Either 12 something GS or a 1300 GS or M1300 GS or M1250 GS, because that may happen as well. Now, after talking about all those more crazy and less crazy dreams, I would not want to know actually how much such a GS would have to cost if it was to have all those features added. On the other hand, they may be just options on this already not so affordable motorcycle. Also, if they would implement all that, then in the next 10 years they could only make it a powerful hybrid maybe, or add an option of automatic gearbox. I cannot think of many other huge new things, to be fair, and as we see, they mostly come from cars. But what would you guys want the new GS to have? Let me know in the comments, and let's hope that BMW will listen. They still likely have some time. And I'm curious what other ideas you guys might have, because that's all I've been having in my head so far. So please let me know, and if you enjoyed, then give the video a thumb up, and see you in the upcoming one.